वंशी विभूषितकरा नवनीरदाभा पीतांबरा धरुणबिंबफलादरोष्टा पूर्णेन्दुसुन्दरमुखात् अरविन्दनेत्रात् कृष्णात् परं किमपि तत्त्वमहं न जाने अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः. Divine souls, last week we went through this verse 10 of chapter 5. As you know, Bhagwan has been replying to Arjuna's question, which pertains to distinction between karma yogi and karma sannyasi. In this verse 10, Bhagwan is talking about karma yogi. A karma yogi, how he acts. Karmani karotiya. He performs action. How? Brahmanyadhaya. He dedicates all his actions to Bhagwan. And he also does not get associated with attachment. He abandons attachment. So the two qualifications. One, on one hand, he is getting rid of association with sansar, and on the other hand, he is catching hold of the grace of Bhagwan. He seeks grace of Bhagwan in all his actions, whatever is performed. So what is the result? Bhagwan says, Lipyate na sapapena. He does not incur any sin. No merit is associated with the karma he performs. And Bhagwan has given a beautiful example how a person living in this world, performing all the actions, yet he does not get touched by the demerit of karma. No karma phala or demerit of karma gets associated with this person who performs his action with total dedication to Bhagwan and not attaching with sansar. And the example is like Padma Patra Mivan Bhasa. Padma Patra is lotus leaf and Ambasa is water. Although that leaf gets nutrition from that water or mud in the water, under the water, and sustained and serve on the all its sustainment goes from the water on which it lies, yet it doesn't get wet by the water on it. We have discussed about last week. Now, moving ahead, the next verse, again, Bhagwan is talking about karma yogi. And he says here, Kayena manasa buddhya kevalairindriyairapi yoginah karma kuruvanti sangam tyaktva atma shuddhaye. Meaning is kayena, that means the body, manasa means the mind, buddhya is the intellect, kevalai is only, indriye api, indriye with the senses, api even, yoginah karma kurvanti, yoginah perform actions, sangam tyaktva, giving up attachment, atma suddhaye, for the purification of self. So the meaning here is, in this verse, through this verse, Bhagavan is saying that a karma yogi, while giving up attachment, you see the sangam tyaktva, see I have marked with the black. This is a very bad thing, worst thing which one can get associated with sangam. And so many verses. We have in earlier verse also he talked about sangam tyaktva. That is the one, the attachment is the worst thing one can have in life. Once you are attached to the sansar, to any object of the world, including the body, your downfall is destined. So, again here emphasizing, sangam tyaktva, karma kurvanti, yoginah. That means that person, the yogi, karma yogi, in this verse, there are 4 components. One component is that this is action performed by karma yogi. Then the second component is that he has given up attachment. The third component is he perform action with body, senses, mind and intellect. And the fourth component is only for the purpose of self-purification. So there are these 4 components. Let us look at each component one by one. Now, when we talk about karma yogi, the thing is he performs action. Karma kurvanti. He acts. He performs. He is engaged in action. As against a karma sannyasi. In that case, he considers himself to be akarta. Naiva kinchit karomiti. If you remember earlier in the verse 8, we talked about Naiva kinchit karoti saha yukto manyet tattvavit. There we explained that the karma sannyasi, he is tattvavit. He is yukta. And once he is united with the Brahma, and while attaching himself to Brahma, he is not the performer of action as against karma yogi, who is the performer of action. Here he is a witness of action. So there is a distinction between a karma yogi who acts, performs, as against karma sannyasi, where he is sakshi, he is witness to actions being performed. The karma yogi, he surrenders himself to the feet of Lord, he finds himself to be instrument in the hands of Lord, while a karma sannyasi has already got yukta with Brahma, and as such, he dissociates completely with the performance action. He is upadrashta, he is onlooker, he is witness to the actions being performed. So that distinction one has to keep on, because throughout the whole chapter of this 5, Bhagavan is answering to and trying to convince Arjuna the distinction and no distinction insofar the goal is to be achieved. That also he keeps on reminding. So we have to Keep these two factors in mind as we move ahead in explaining the verses. Now coming to the second part, that is the body, senses, mind and intellect. See, these are so beautifully arranged by Bhagavan. When we talk about body, we are talking about that the कर्मेंद्रियां, हमारे जितने कर्मेंद्रियां हैं, हाथ पैर गुदा उपस्थ, all these act, they are also participating in action. Although they are secondary, they are all following the mind and intellect, and senses are involved. So all these are कर्मेंद्रिय, ज्ञानेन्द्रिय and कर्मेंद्रिय with man or buddhi. These four components, these are the, you can see in a car, you have got the wheel, you have got the steering, you have got the brake, and you have got the clutch. These are the various instruments which take the car forward or backward. So there is action being performed, and there are various components take part in performance of action. If clutch is not working, the brake is not working, one of the parts not working, then you will not be able to make the car move, or the action of car will not be as required. As here Bhagavan is saying, and all these four components, the body, mind, senses and the intellect, they are all integrated. And he uses the word kevalai indriya, beautiful. This is Sanskrit word. These words have loaded with value. So beautifully put in here. If you say इंद्रियां काम करती हैं, मन काम करता है, बुद्धि काम करती है, ठीक है, लेकिन केवल ही डाल देने से they have to be integrated, they have to be well aligned. ऐसा नहीं है कि मन कुछ कह रहा है और हमारी आंखें कुछ और कर रही है, मन कुछ कर रहा है और पैर कुछ कर रहा है. मंदिर जाने का विचार हुआ, पैर कहता है नहीं, थका हुआ हूं, नहीं जाऊंगा, नहीं चल पाऊंगा. So there is no coordination into the activities. Mind is telling you to perform some action. On the other hand, your senses and your parts, other components are not cooperating with you. That will not be able to, you will not be able to achieve the target which you have set. So here Bhagavan is saying the Kayena, Mansa, Buddhya ke Indriya, all of them are performing in cooperating with each other. They are well aligned, integrated. Why they are doing this? Why Karma Yogi makes use of all the various components of the body? What is the aim? What is the goal? That goal is Atma Suddhe. Goal is to Chitta Suddhi, get rid of the impurities. You get purification. You want your Antahkaran to be purified. You see here, although the word is Atma Suddhe, or it is translated as self-purification, it is not the आत्मा we're talking about, because आत्मा अशुद्ध होता ही नहीं है. आत्म शुद्धि किसकी होगी? जो अशुद्ध होगा. The one which is impure, that has to be purified. So one has to take into consideration the word. When we talk of Atma Suddhe, somebody can say, how come why are you talking about Atma Suddhe? Does Atma get impurity? Do you want to have impurity? Is there impurity in the Atma? No, it is not so. We have to understand it differently. Let me come to that. So what happens when we are performing action? The power has to come from Brahma, the what is called witness consciousness. There is consciousness, but witness consciousness it is not associated with the senses, mind, intellect. In a way, no direct involvement. It is through what is called a reflected consciousness. The power of Brahma, like magnet, for example. If you have magnet and you have got iron foils there, it is not directly in what is the iron foils get magnified, not directly magnetic. It is no magnetism inside. If you analyze that iron foil, it is not magnetized. But when it comes in contact or close to the magnet, then it gets charged up. Here what happens, Bhagavan, or it is described, our sages and saints have analyzed this, and modern scientists are working hard to really understand this, that there is what is called intrinsic property and the property which is borrowed. The intrinsic property, like in sun has its intrinsic property of dahika and prakasika. Two powers are there in sun. One is the power to provide heat and other is to provide light. But that is in sun. But that sun, when it gives light to moon, moon hasn't got its own power of giving light, but it gets reflected. The rays from sun is reflected through moon, and that when we get moonlight. So that is a reflected property. In the body, we have what is called antakaran, man, buddhi, chit or ahankar. These are inner instrument. That is in our system. There is a system what is called antakaran. And the Brahma which is in our body, that is witness consciousness, is reflected onto this reflecting surface. This antakaran has a reflecting surface, and that reflecting surface gets darkened or dimmed depending upon the layer of impurity on it, and those impurities are called mal, vikshep and avaran. I have gone through this previously, but this should be kept in mind all the time, that the impurities are there. All you can call it tamoguni, satoguni, rajoguni and tamoguni. These are the impurities. So when the impurities are there, it is not in the Atma, not in the self, but it is in Antahkaran. So those impurities, Bhagavan says, a person who has been performing action with all the instruments in an integrated way, well aligned, and the aim is, his action is aimed at getting rid of the impurities from his antahkarana, so that the power which is there in supreme consciousness or witness consciousness is unhindered, and it purifies the whole. Once purification takes place, ajnana is lost and you get jnana one with it. When that avarana, mala, is the impurities, and then vikshep, even after mal is taken away, there is vikshep. That means it is not still. In terms of Patanjali Yoga Shastra, it has been described like water in the lake. The water in the lake, at the bottom of the lake, if there is a coin or gold iron rod is put there, you will not be able to see that iron piece there, or the golden piece there, because the water is muddy. That is mal. If the mud is removed, still you will not be able to see that gold coin if the water is not still. The water has to be still. That is vikshep. What vikshep is, that it is not still. You need still mind to be able to concentrate on Bhagavan. And that once it is still, then you will be able to see the gold coin at the lower part of the lake. So that is the big shape. And then there is again one thin layer, an avaran. That avaran is of agyan, ignorance. And that once ignorance is taken away, you are one with Brahma. So here in this verse, Bhagavan is talking about how a karma yogi, making use of his components or instruments, Sangam Tyaktva, getting rid of the attachment, he is performing in an integrated way and well-aligned way, and his aim is what is called self-purification. He wants to purify his antahkaran so that he is enlightened. He becomes one with Brahma. Now, this same philosophy, Ramana Maharshi has beautifully described in these 4 dictums he has got, when he says, Iswara arapitam na ichha kritam chitta sodakam mukti sadanam. This is given in Upadesa Saram by Maharshi Ramana, and which means again, a person who is dedicating all his work actions to God, na ichchakritam, not desiring, that means he is getting kamana, getting rid of desire. Chitta sodakam, we purify the inner equipment, that is antakaran. When that is purified, mukti sadanam, that is the aid to liberation. He becomes liberated. So the dedicating the results of action to God, not desiring, leads to purification of antakaran. And this practice is an aid to liberation. And this is what Ramana Maharshi has described. Now, as I mentioned in this, what is happening, that all these activities, when there is self-purification, what happens? That person gets yukta. That means he gets united with. There is no distinction between, there is no more separation between Jivatma and Paramatma. They become one. So then the next verse, Bhagavan, in verse 12, Bhagavan talks about that person who has become yukta, and again gives a comparison or contrast situation so far ayukta is concerned. He says, yukta karma phalam tyaktva shanti mapnoti naistikim ayukta kama karena hale sakto nivadyate. Yukta, we have just heard that the person who performs all his actions in the integrated way, submitting that at the feet of Lord, then he is able to purify himself and be one with Brahma. And that person, Yukta, is united with self. This is what Maharaj always talks about, जीवत्व को छोड़कर ईश्वरत्व की प्राप्ति करना. गीता में throughout Bhagavad Gita, all the sadhanas, जितने साधना है, सब साधना एक ही पर्पस है, जीवत्व को छोड़कर ईश्वरत्व की प्राप्ति करना. And that is to get one with Brahma. So now this person, this again karma yogi, who has become yukta now, he is karma phala tyaktva. He is now giving up the results of all karma. He's given up the results of all the activities. And once he does that, what happens to him? Santim apnoti. After having performed action, whatever results come in, he doesn't bother about it. He gives up those actions, and by that doing, he is having naistikim santi, that santi which is everlasting, naistikim. On the other hand, ayukta kamakarena phale sakto nibadyate. Again, this kamakarena desire comes. Impelled by kamakarena, impelled by desire, and here is phale sakto. Here is phalam tyaktva. On the other hand, this ayukta is phale sakto. He is attached to the results of action. He is sakta, the result of the action. He is attached. And when that happens, nibadyate, he becomes entangled. Here Bhagavan is talking about yukta and comparing it with or contrasting it with what happens to ayukta. So, offering the results of activities to God, the karma yogi attains everlasting peace, whereas those who being impelled by desire, work with a selfish motive, become entangled because they're attached to the fruits of their action. So that's once that happens, then one gets santi, other gets asanti, opposite to that. You will see in Bhagavan, throughout whole Gita, he talks about santi, sukha, sukham. So sukham and santi are given in Bhagavad Gita so many places. And if you go to that, again it talks about grades of santi, naishtikim santi, param santi, saswada santim, anantaram santim, like that. So I have given those verses and the chapter and verses I have given there. Those interested can make note of that, and at your own leisure time, you can go through these verses and analyze the various kinds of santi which Bhagavan is talking about in this. But in this verse, Bhagavan is talking about ayukta and yukta. These are the two sides of the same coin. You are performing action, but one is performing with attachment, one is performing with aim at the fruit of the action. On the other hand, one is not having any eye on the fruit of action, and he is also performing without any attachment. On the other hand, he is submitting everything at the feet of the Lord. This same yukta and santi is again mentioned in verse 66 of chapter 2, where Bhagavan says, Nasti buddhir yuktasya na cha yuktasya bhavana na cha bhavayatah santi asantasya kutah sukham. He is talking about what happens to ayukta. There is no knowledge of self to him. Of course, he is far away from having any knowledge of what is Brahma or what is Atma. He is associated with the body and sansar. His activity is always swa for his own self and for his own gain and own attachment with the public, with the objects of the world, and with that he is associated. His life is throughout associated with the involvement of sansar. But of course, he will not have any peace of mind. Sometimes temporarily he will have some peace, some pleasure. Again, he will go into misery and he will have suffering. So his ups and downs in his life will go on. Bhagavan says, Asantasya utah sukham. How can a person who has no peace of mind will have any happiness? So this person has no knowledge of the self. That was that he has not able to meditate. Of course, it's not possible. His mind is so disturbed that he has no peace. He is not able to concentrate. He will never be able to meditate. Nacha bhavayata santi. That unmeditative person, there is no possibility of attaining peace. And to that person who has no peace, Bhagavan says, asantasya utah sukham. So that way he will not be having peace of mind. Now, there is I think I will stop here because I will give some 5 minutes time to others as Joshi ji has mentioned. But next week I will explain to you as to how you can attain peace. And there are various grades of peace. There are 5 steps to eternal peace. If one wants, you see, each one of us are lying at one stage or the other, and we have scope, possibility to attain eternal peace. Next week, as I'll explain to you, as I'll try to explain by the grace of Bhagavan, the steps one can, these are practical steps which each one of us are taking and have possibility of improving ourselves so that ultimately we get eternal peace. As I'll explain this next week. Thank you very much. Jai Sri Krishna. Jai Gurudev.